Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be with you here today, and congratulations on your wonderful MEP list. I'm excited to tell you more about Hope Crew and our work to support the preservation trades movement. But before I do, I'll show you some embarrassing pictures of myself to demonstrate the winding path that's led me here and still colors the lenses through which I see opportunities. I did not expect Rachel to know so much about me, so that some of this will be a little repetitive, but my graduate degree is in architecture. And I came to that from an interdisciplinary background of American studies. And I've always been drawn to the people side of things, much like Warren's opening remarks, the aggregation of people and places, not just the bricks and mortar. And I've spent my somewhat short professional life in nonprofit real estate development, largely focused on affordable housing and gentrifying areas, and then at the nation's architectural organization of AIA, where I worked on practice innovation, women's leadership, resources for aspiring architects. And I've always found the people side of the built environment. And now I work with Hope Crew. Hope Crew is a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And for 70 years, the National Trust has led the movement to save America's historic places. A privately funded nonprofit organization, we work to save America's historic sites, tell the full American story, build stronger communities, and invest in preservation's future. Hope Crew is the Trust Trades training arm, and that's what I'll be mostly talking with you about today. I will mention, of course, we are just one national organization working to support and develop the preservation trades pipeline. There's an amazing ecosystem of national, statewide, and local partners that all have different approaches and strategies to help tackle the issue, of which preservation PPS with initiatives like the Trades Community Workshop and Incubator that we hope will become a national model. We consider you guys amongst the partners as well. And I wish you luck on your pitch and the People's Choice Award for PBS. A common example that highlights the need for and shortage of skilled trades labor is in the event of a natural disaster. This is the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo on Charleston, South Carolina, which is a common case study in preservation. And right now I'm reading an excerpt. A disaster such as Hurricane Hugo, which devastated Charleston in 1989, dramatically illustrates that the conservation of the built environment is fundamentally dependent on the skill and availability of the men and women who do the actual physical work of preservation. In the weeks following the storm, the shortage of tradespeople with knowledge and skills to repair the historic fabric of Charleston's older buildings quickly emerged as one of the greatest challenges of the rebuilding effort. And that's from Lisa Sasser in a piece titled "Why the Preservation Trades Matter." And Hope Crew is thankfully one of a few trades training programs that exist nationally and around the country that deploy different tactics and methodologies to address this shortage. Hope Crew's model is a heavily partnership-based model. Our team partners with trades experts around the country to lead experiential training programs, typically 2 to 6 weeks in length, showcasing a foundational preservation trade skill, which are skills used to steward the built environment, such as masonry, carpentry, mortar repointing, properly painting historic materials, the skills we need to care for our historic building stock. In its more recent iterations, we work with historic sites and partner with youth serving organizations, universities, and other affinity and advocacy groups to source local participants to work on the sites in their own communities. This also helps our site partners receive often deferred or necessary maintenance. And we're funded separately through grants, task agreements, donations, and corporate and foundation support. Here's a rough breakdown of the numbers of impact that Hope Crew has had around the country that we are very proud of, and those numbers have even gone up a bit since this slide was created. And because we are the National Trust for Historic Preservation, we also look for synergy and overlap with other programs and initiatives to further capitalize on our work. And this includes our overlap with 2 trust initiatives, one being the Where Women Made History campaign and the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. In 2020, the Where Women Made History crowdsourcing campaign inspired the public to identify over 1,000 places in all 50 states, showcasing the unknown and underrepresented stories of women as preservationists, artists, activists, scholars, entrepreneurs, and professionals. Through this campaign, we've launched efforts to focus on the lack of women in the trades. Reading another excerpt. Although underrepresented groups such as women represent a huge labor pool, they are not always welcomed into the construction industry. Regarding participation of women craft workers, a study conducted by the National Women's Law Center in 2012 indicated the percentage of women in construction trades has remained almost the same from 1983 to 2010. This creates a major contrast between the jobs in construction industry and other industries regarding gender diversification. In fact, the percentage of women in many other occupations that used to be male dominated have increased during the same period, 1983 to 2010. Meanwhile, construction trades pay better than many job opportunities for women, and they could be attracted to the industry if contractors could provide a better work environment. As Schleifer in 2002 discussed, increasing women participation in construction craft occupations is one of the quickest solutions available to the industry to reduce its skilled workforce shortage. And this is from a CII study, which is the Construction Industry Institute out of UT Austin. So in July, we partnered with Oregon tradeswomen, University of Oregon, and the Tongue Point Job Corps to bring the first majority women's Hope Crew in the program's 7 years of existence. The project was all women leadership and majority women from leadership to labor, including the trades expert, who was Ariana Macau, who was founder and president of the Oakland-based Zilani Glass Conservation. Macau is the first woman to receive a master's degree in stained glass conservation from the Royal College of Art in London. The Oddfellows building was also saved and is now owned and operated by women and is home to all women-owned businesses. And that's really one thing Hope Crew is proud of. In telling the full American story, we're able to craft experiences that let underrepresented groups see themselves in the preservation movement. Hope Crew has 3 general umbrellas or models in which we interface with the public. The first is Introduction to the Preservation Trades. The Oddfellows project I just spoke about is that model. We secure funding, find a historic site in need, and source local youth to help address the site's needs. These experiences are typically 2 to 6 weeks in length and result in a building feature being restored or preserved based on the Secretary of Interior standards. For this Oddfellows project, the trades expert and crew focused on scraping and reglazing the historic clear story windows on site. The next model is Preservation in Practice, which is a 3-way partnership between the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the National Park Service, and the National Trust. This program focuses on HBCU architecture students. And the intention of Preservation in Practice was never to create more tradespeople, more so to create more preservation-minded future architects. In a non-COVID year, this would be a 4 to 6 week in-person experience that would include a Hope Crew on the students' campuses, along with 2 other in-person experiences focused on preservation in the trades. I'll speak a little bit more about this model in a moment, but the third way we interface with the public is through large-scale volunteer projects that engages a large group of the public in a very simple, low-skill trade for the good of a historic site. Pictured is Hinchcliffe Stadium, which was built by the city of Paterson, New Jersey in 1932, and it was closed in 1996 and fell victim to neglect and vandalism. Hinchcliffe is one of the few remaining stadiums associated with Negro League baseball. A team of 700 volunteers from Hope Crew, Youth Corps, and other affiliations worked together to repaint Hinchcliffe's walls in 1 day. So it's been an interesting time to come on as director of a hands-on program during a global pandemic, but thankfully we've remained busy through virtual work and light returns to the field. I'll showcase one digital pivot we made for Preservation in Practice and talk about some of our returns. I mentioned a few slides ago that Preservation in Practice is the model where we typically interface with HBCU architecture students on a 3-part in-person experience. And when we learned we would not be in person again in 2021, we took to crafting an experience that would better align with the training that aspiring architects are receiving. Since the goal was never quite to cultivate more tradespeople with this touch point. So I have a background in architecture and my colleague on the team has a background in trades. So we looked for the crosshairs of where preservation trades and architecture aligned. And one of those areas that stood out was documentation. So with funding from the National Park Service, we piloted a 6-week digital documentation fellowship for 3 HBCU architecture students that worked with point cloud data on a site of African-American heritage significance, which was the poet Langston Hughes' home in Harlem. The students created measured drawings of the historic house in Revit, worked on submission boards, and a website that was intended to explore how heritage resources could be made more accessible to the public. Their drawings and studies resulted in a Holland Prize submission, which is run through the Library of Congress. And we knew early on through this program that only a sliver of Library of Congress documentation shares the history of African-American heritage sites. So through this program, there's at least one more accessible in there. And the students all remarked that they had no idea how much preservation was related to architecture, and that they were shocked to learn that their skills that they're learning in school could be used towards the movement. And I will say, you never know where the spark of interest is going to happen. So casting a wide net has been advantageous for our program. The last project I'll mention in the field was with another HBCU in DC, which offered a very unexpected overlap. And this was the most recent Hope Crew my colleague and I completed, where we partnered with UDC. We reached out to the architecture school expecting that the work we were looking to carry out would be of interest to them, but ended up connecting with the political science majors who'd participated in an elective in the spring called Black Land Lost, where they looked at oral histories of family members and descendants of Black families in DC who'd had land legally taken from them. And young people who had an interest in history and place made it real to them. They very much connected with the project, even more so than some participants with backgrounds in trades, possibly because they were brought to it through the human side. And they labored in the near unbearable swamp-like heat that is DC in August, and in full sun with oak mites abound, scanning 2 sites in DC with ground penetrating radar. One site was Lafayette Pointer Park, which was the site they'd studied in the spring elective. And the other site was Mount Zion, which is a historically Black cemetery in Georgetown. And this is something that they discovered through some of the photogrammetry and scanning, which is an interesting example. What you see on the left is what you saw on site. And through a number of mesh scans and resurfacing, you were able to see what the headstone actually said. If you look at that final one, you can see that there is something written there. And so smoothing the surface and reusing it a second time, it looks as though the headstone was flipped upside down and a second name was written in there by hand and used to mark another body in the site. So through everything I've discussed, I tend to think of Hope Crew as filling a very important niche, and that is most accurately depicted as workforce cultivation rather than workforce development. And we're knitting together the interest to make preservation real to young people who would otherwise not know preservation or preservation trades existed. And you'd be hard pressed to find a staunch tradesperson who felt after 6 weeks someone would be employable on site, but it's the cultivation that matters in this model. Any landscape studies show that the vast number of programs, degrees, certificates, workshops that are all individually working to make an impact, but it's also notable that despite the shortage of tradespeople and demonstrated need, training programs still curiously go defunct and cease to exist, and it's not always tied to the funding. There aren't necessarily a shortage of training programs always, although access is certainly part of the problem, but more systemically, there's a pipeline issue. And if I haven't stated it plainly, I really love and value the nimbleness that Hope Crew can maintain to craft experiences that really make preservation in the trades real to the next potential wave of the workforce. We pilot hundreds of experiences, we touch thousands of people, and help to make this potential career one that connects with people and helps them with the vision to see themselves in this field. And scaling out a bit, I'll lastly speak to the larger ecosystem of preservation trades advocacy. Before telling you a bit about Hope Crew, I started this talk by mentioning that Hope Crew is just one of many programs working to make an impact on the trades professional shortage. And to me, this ecosystem becoming more collaborative is key. I believe a siloed approach to any industry-wide issue as prevalent as trades labor shortage is a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. And these types of synchronized efforts that I'm talking about are able to see the issue through many different angles and lenses, and that type of pluralism is what it takes to actually move the needle. There are two national task forces I'll mention. One is the Traditional Trades Training Task Force, which was convened by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to tackle policy statements, explore apprenticeship advocacy, and aid in universal curriculum. And through a partnership with the National Park Service, Preservation Maryland has made amazing strides. in this work and that was started by this task force and launched the Historic Trades Council. The second coalition is the Preservation Priorities Task Force, which is a partnership between the National Trust and the National Preservation Partners Network, NPPN, which is the voice of state and local partners in preservation. And the group is tackling 4 key areas, of which trades is one. But this partnership allows us to come together and have both national reach and visibility into local and geographical nuances. And because how the web of access, awareness, perception, crossover with rural versus urban or metropolitan life is so complex that no one organization or partner could see all of the facets. And I will say the revolution in preservation trades will not be a white paper. So we're trying to advocate creatively and intelligently and with a unified front in hopes of moving the needle. So thank you for listening to me about the work of Hope Crew. And if there are any questions, I look forward to continuing the conversation.